Hey guys, so we all know the scripture that I'm about to read, so I'm going to give it to you and then give you a little bit of context to hopefully make this scripture fresh again and remind us why this is so impactful when it comes to us not having anxiety, not worrying, not being afraid. So it's Philippians chapter 4 verse 12. This is Paul speaking. He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Now, we know the scripture and we understand this state that Paul was able to be in where he always was content. No matter what was going on in his life, no matter what had happened or was happening, he was able to be content. To me, this is the very antithesis of being anxious or being worried. Now, to give you some context of what Paul had been through whenever he said this, number one, before Paul's conversion, he was dedicated to the suffering of Christianity, to the persecuting of Christians. So many times in our own lives, I think what causes us to not feel free or to feel like we're in shackles or to suffer is because of things we've done in our past, things we feel guilt for or shame for. It's important to note that Paul murdered, persecuted Christians, and yet he was able to say, in all things, I've learned to be content. So clearly, that guilt and that shame, he had received forgiveness for those things and he didn't hold on to them. Number two, the Jews plotted to kill Paul, and he knew that they were plotting to kill him because they were waiting at the city gates and he would find other ways to get in and out of cities. So you and I get anxious, and I'm pointing the finger at myself in our own lives because maybe we think someone doesn't like us, right? Or because someone says something bad against us. Paul knew that there were people plotting to kill him, to murder him. So he would take alternate routes. And yet, in all things, he had learned to be content, to not be anxious, worried, or afraid. And then finally, Paul was whipped, given hard labor, shipwrecked, imprisoned multiple times, beaten with rods, stoned multiple times, cold and naked, which we don't get an explanation on that. Maybe that was when he was in prison. So he suffered a lot. And yet we have things that go on in our lives where we suffer, and that could be maybe like a class doesn't go well, or maybe we eat a late lunch today, or maybe somebody does say something that is frustrating to us, or something happens, somebody cuts us off in traffic. And yet Paul goes through all of these things, and yet he's able to be content in anything. So suffering should not keep us from being content. Now, I know that's difficult, but on the other end of that is anxiety, anxiousness, worry, and suffering. So, if we can remember Paul and remember the reason for his security, which is at the very end of the scripture that we just read, the reason that he's able to be content in everything, and this is the last thought, is that he can do all things. We can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. I hope you guys have a great day today. We'll talk to you later.